So, the American Revolution is over. The smoke has cleared, and the brand new United States is standing there, victorious but also kind of lost. It was a time of huge potential but also massive, massive uncertainty. They call it the critical period, and for good reason. Today, we're going to dig into how America's very first government was built on a deep, deep fear of power, and how it nearly fell apart because of it.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You just spent years fighting a war to get rid of a king and a government an ocean away that was taxing you, controlling you, and telling you what to do. The absolute last thing you want to do is turn around and build another one just like it. So, what do you build? That was the million-dollar question for the founders. Well, their answer came directly from the ideals they just fought for. They wanted a system where the people had a say, where your rights were actually protected, and, this is the big one, where there were serious, hard-coded limits on what the government could do. The memory of King George was still fresh, and it cast a shadow over everything.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with that core dilemma, then look at how the states started experimenting with their own governments. From there, we'll jump into the nation's first constitution, the Articles of Confederation. We'll check out its surprising successes and its not-so-surprising failures, and see how this whole first attempt was pushed right to the edge.
This is really the heart of the whole story. You can't overstate it. The number one absolute biggest fear for the new Americans was creating another tyrant. They were just terrified that any strong national government would, sooner or later, turn into the exact same monster they just fought to get away from. This fear is the key to understanding everything that happens next.
So interestingly, before they even tackled a national government, the states got to work. All 13 of them started writing their own constitutions. You can think of them as these little laboratories of democracy, each one trying to figure out the best way to make those revolutionary ideals a reality.
And right away, you could see two main camps forming. On one side, you had more conservative states like Massachusetts that wanted two houses in the legislature and a governor with some actual power. On the other, you had more liberal states like New Jersey that went with a single legislature and intentionally weak governors. But here's the common thread. Even the so-called strong governments had all sorts of checks and limits built right in.
And that whole mindset, that focus on the states, and the deep suspicion of power, that's what gave us the first national government. It was never meant to be a powerful, unified nation. It was designed to be something much, much looser.
This quote right here from Article 2, this sentence tells you everything you need to know. The states are the stars of the show. They keep all their power, all their freedom. The new national government, it basically got the leftovers, only the few specific powers the states felt like handing over.
And here it is, the Articles of Confederation. Ratified in 1781, it created a government with just one branch, a Congress. That's it. No president to enforce the laws, no national court system to interpret them. And most important of all, Congress couldn't regulate trade and had pretty much zero power to tax. This thing was weak by design.
This phrase from Article 3 is just perfect. A firm league of friendship. That's what the United States was. Think about it less like a family, bound together as one, and more like a club. A bunch of independent members who agree to hang out and help each other with a few things, but they're still fundamentally separate.
And here's where the problems start. Because a friendship is nice, but it's no way to run a country. Since the government couldn't regulate trade, states started having tariff wars with each other. Since it couldn't tax, it had no way to pay off its massive war debts. It couldn't even enforce its own laws. The system was basically running on the honor system, and it wasn't working.
Now, it's really easy to look back and just say the Articles were a total disaster. But believe it or not, that's not the whole story. It actually had one massive, history-changing success that we have to talk about.
Okay, so the single greatest thing the Confederation Congress ever did was figure out what to do with all that new land west of the Appalachian Mountains. It was a huge question mark, and their solution was, frankly, brilliant.
They created something called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. It was basically a step-by-step recipe for how a territory could become a state. It laid out this clear, democratic path for new states to join the Union as equals, not as colonies. And get this, it also guaranteed civil rights and flat-out banned slavery in this huge new territory. For the 1780s, that was a radical, forward-thinking move.
And this is the land we're talking about. This orderly process created the blueprint for what would become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It was a huge policy win, and it all happened under the supposedly failed Articles of Confederation.
Okay, so that was the good news. But that one major success was completely buried by a mountain of failures, and almost all of them came down to one simple thing: money. The government was broke, and its own rules made it impossible to do anything about it.
Just look at these numbers. The national government owed millions to its own citizens and soldiers. The states were drowning in their own separate debts. And on top of all that, the country owed millions to countries like France that helped pay for the war.
All told, we're talking over $75 million. Now, that might not sound like a crazy number today, but back then, it was an astronomical, completely crushing amount of debt. And the national government, with no power to tax, could do nothing but go to the states, hat in hand, and politely ask for money, which, as you can imagine, they rarely got.
And it all comes back to the design. You have to remember, these weaknesses weren't bugs, they were features. No president, no courts, and no power to tax, that was all on purpose. The founders were more afraid of a powerful government than they were of a little chaos. The problem was, a whole lot of chaos was knocking on the door.
So by the mid-1780s, the whole system was creaking and groaning. It was at a breaking point. The government couldn't fix the economy, it couldn't put down rebellions, and it couldn't command any respect on the world stage. That League of Friendship just wasn't strong enough to hold the country together.
So let's just nail this down. A confederation is a system where the states have all the real power. They're basically sovereign countries that just agree to work together on a few things. The United States, under the Articles, wasn't one nation yet. It was 13 separate states in a friendly and failing alliance.
Which brings us to the final critical question. This whole experiment in a super weak central government, an experiment born out of a deep fear of tyranny, was on the verge of total collapse. The League of Friendship was falling apart. So, was it time to try something else? Was it time for something stronger, more permanent? Was it time to stop being friends and start being a family?